Live. Welcome on in, ladies and gentlemen. This is the NAIA Ball Podcast, Season 7, Episode 7. I am your host, Tyler Norris.
And I'm your co-host, Taylor Thomas.
Taylor, how are things going, man? It's been a pretty good week, I'd say. We had obviously a lot of good ball games this weekend that we'll get into later in the episode, but overall, how was your week?
Pretty solid, caught some postponed weekend action, I would say, between Oklahoma City and MACU on Monday as they finished up that series. A really offensive one as we had some crazy wind here, so a lot of high offensive numbers here in the state of Oklahoma and around the Midwest. Like you said, a lot of good ball games as conference play is getting underway, and we do have some big ones this week.
I was going to say, I know you mentioned last week that you were catching some high school sports, and I did see that it looked like it got pretty crazy at that basketball game.
Yeah, that's one of my friends said that this past week. That's kind of our Rosenblatt Stadium, if you will, or the State Fair Arena has been there for 59 years, since 1965, and they packed it out, about 11,000 people in there. It was pretty electric atmosphere to see, that's for sure. As you know, March Madness is getting underway too around the country, so it's really a good time for all sports, NAIA baseball, college baseball getting underway, and then of course, like you said, basketball. It was pretty electric.
And speaking about March Madness, Taylor, I'm for one excited for that because you always got to go with the little quad screen action wherever you're watching. But Man Cave for sure going to be the setup for that. Speaking of man caves, I had one hell of a setup this weekend for Saturday because, as you know, there was a huge UFC card this past weekend, but obviously there were some very good matchups across the NAI this weekend that I could not miss. So let me paint a picture for you here. So down here in the basement, I got the TV mounted on the wall. So I had UFC on the mounted wall. In front of the mounted wall, I had another TV set up with NAI games that I was watching throughout the day. And then on top of that, not done yet. On top of that, I had my monitor set up with my PlayStation plugged in. So, I mean, paint me a better Saturday than that. I don't think you can. And obviously, I'm not a betting man, but if you were to bet on the UFC picks that I presented this week, you probably would have won some big money. But yeah, quite the weekend for me personally. But quite a bit of news around the league this past week. A lot of milestones were eclipsed, and I will start with Kansas Wesleyan head coach Bill Neal collected his career win number 300 after a clean 3-game sweep over McPherson. What an accomplishment for Bill.
Yeah, absolutely. They've been a program on the rise here in the past couple of years, especially, and obviously with a number like 300, that's very evident to see. In some more news too, and even more offensive numbers, like we had mentioned earlier on, Peyton McDowell from USAO sets the career home run record at USAO, surpassing Brandy Lyerly, who played there from 2006 to 2009. He had a big weekend out there in Hobbs, New Mexico, against University of the Southwest. Big time weekend for Peyton McDowell.
Peyton McDowell, folks, going to be a name you're going to hear quite often throughout this episode, but a huge week from him. He's starting to pick things up there in Chickasha. Another milestone, staying in Oklahoma, mind you. Starting pitcher for MACU, Isaac Baez became the all-time career NAIA wins leader at MACU. Of course, MACU has only been a part of the NAIA since 2007. So his career win number 14 coming against Oklahoma City this past weekend gives him that career wins leader for the university with 14 and counting.
And LSU Shreveport bullpen arm Josh Fortenberry is now the all-time leader at LSU Shreveport in career appearances, making his 81st career appearance and his pilot career this past weekend.
Speaking of Fortenberry, I don't know if you mentioned or if you happened to catch this, Taylor, on X. They did post a video of it becoming official because he obviously had to throw one pitch in the inning. So they recorded his first pitch of the inning. So it was official then and there. I don't know if you saw that, but I caught that. And that was a pretty cool little tweet. I don't even know. Do you call them tweets still? Because it's not Twitter, but like, are we still referring to them as tweets? Because what else would you call it?
I personally say tweets. I don't really know what else you'd call it, but that's just what's stuck in my head, and probably will continue to.
Yeah, that's gonna be forever stuck in my head because obviously they rebranded Twitter to X, but they never changed, like, unless I'm just completely been living under a rock and missing this, I don't think they ever changed it, from tweets. But anyway, LSU Shreveport posted that, and I thought it was very cool. Um, we have another university, Taylor, that will be rebranding. I know we mentioned SAGU last week as a team that will be, or not a team, mind you, this is the university as a whole, but Union College down in Kentucky will be rebranding to Union Commonwealth University. I would imagine this is following the 2024 season going into the fall of 24. I did not happen to catch that, but I would assume that would be the case there. So Union College is now going to be Union Commonwealth University.
And Indiana Wesleyan MJ Stavola over the weekend became the all-time career leader in stolen bases, recording his 87th stolen base and counting this past weekend.
Okay, I gotta say, first of all, that's insane. And I mean, we're still pretty early on here. He's gonna easily eclipse 100. And
Yeah,
I
no
would,
question about it.
I don't know off the top of my head what the all-time like NAI leader is for stolen bases, but I imagine it can't be that well off of 100. I mean, obviously that's a stat I'm gonna want to look up after recording this, but you got to, I mean, I don't know, especially with COVID and all that stuff going on, guys
It's
are getting
impressive.
extra years. So maybe that's going to help him out, but he's easily going to get 100. And I would love to see where he stacks up all time NAI, because I imagine somebody like Lou Brock might be up there.
No question about it. I mean, that's super impressive, like you said, and I believe it was a 3 stolen base game to break the all-time mark. So I mean, a huge shout out goes to MJ.
Stavola with the wheels. Gonna hopefully see him eclipse 100 this year. Last little milestone we have from this past week, Point Park head coach Lauren Torres records career win number 500 at Point Park. And this is also to note that he is the only Point Park coach in history to eclipse 500 wins, and that is across any sport at the university. So moving on down here, our weekend review, going to be looking over the games that we told you to watch out for this past week. Starting off here, we had a 17-5 Ottawa, Arizona team going down to Lincoln, going up rather, or across, whichever way you want to call it, going across to Lincoln, California. Maybe it's up and across. That's probably better. Lincoln, California to take on an 18-3 Jessup team. I know I personally picked Ottawa, Arizona. I was the only one out of us, mind you. We will get you the full standings and the quick picks later, but I was the only one who took Ottawa, Arizona. But Jessup really impressed this weekend, Taylor. They took 2 out of 3 by scores of game 1 went to Ottawa, Arizona, 22-5. And then Ottawa, Arizona would drop games 2 and 3 by scores of 9-3 and 3-0.
Yeah, a bit of a different way to win for Jessup out here at their home ballpark there in California. You see that 22-5 score, and you would think that Jessup would be on the winning side of that with that potent offense that they have. But winning those next 2 games, 9-3 and 3-0, I mean, Arizona is a really good team. And if you can win different ball games like that, it's super impressive. And I mean, Jessup's red hot right now, and they continue to roll.
Yeah, I know I think we mentioned this last week during quick picks, but this was going to be Jessup's like first real test, like a step up in competition, if you will, and didn't really seem to phase him. So Jessup a team to watch out for. We will get into them later, a little bit deeper dive into that Jessup team. But moving on here, we had 8 and 10 receiving votes. Middle Georgia State squad heading down to West Point, Georgia to take on Point University, 13-6. One thing to note about this Middle Georgia State team is as we are recording this on Tuesday, the 12th, they did just take out number 2 Georgia Gwinnett, Taylor. I believe that final was 12-10.
Mm-hmm.
So big shout out to Middle Georgia State getting it, being able to scrape one across the old number 2 ranked Grizzlies. But back to this past week when they played Point, Point would take 2 out of the 3 games. Middle Georgia State took game 1, 6-4, and then Point would take games 2 and 3 by scores of 2-1 and 8-6.
Yeah, super impressive by both clubs, like you said, too. All 3 of those games are really close. So I was able to catch some of the end of game 2 there. That was a a 1-0 ball game, and I believe Middle Georgia had a no hitter going into the sixth, if I'm not mistaken. But Point came back obviously and ended up taking that game, and it was a huge momentum swing there for the series as they were end up to take Game 3 in that series. Really impressive out there in Georgia.
Heading over to Kansas, I know we all thought this would maybe be a much closer
Mhm.
matchup than it was. 9-4 Grandview going up against 13th ranked Mid America Nazarene, sitting at 9-7 prior to the matchup. Mid America Naz would sweep all four of these games by scores of 5-4, 7-6, 19-5, and 11-10. And Taylor, looking at these scores, they were all very tightly contested, but one player I know had a huge weekend this past week. I think especially in the last game, Noah Castillo from Mid America Nazarene. I think he had 6 RBIs in one of those games. Just a really outstanding performance. And with tight scores like that, being able to put up runs and produce runs like that obviously has proved to be the difference.
Yeah, and it's something we mentioned last week with the ball being able to fly out there in Kansas, like you know so well. And
All too
the
well.
Pioneers, I mean, coming in, starting off a little bit shaky this year, and they've continued to improve as the year's gone on, taking out a really good Grandview squad that's obviously had a really potent offense coming into this series. And to record that 4-game sweep, that was huge. And Noah Castillo with the walk-off home run there to finish it off. It was a really nice moment. And the Pioneers look to have somewhat righted the ship a little bit.
Yeah, that 4-game sweep has to be a huge morale boost for that Pioneer team. Obviously, they've been kind of streaky to start the year, 6-4 in their last 10 prior to this matchup, and then getting a 4-game sweep over a team that I believe is leading the nation in home runs. I believe the last time we checked. So being able to silence them and scrape across 4 games against an offense like that, got to be a morale booster for that Mid American Naz squad. Staying in the Midwest here, Oklahoma City, Mac U taking on a receiving votes Oklahoma City team. I gotta say, Mac U surprised me here. Not really surprised. Like I knew they were capable of winning. I just, for me, it was all or none. They were going to win all of them or lose all of them. But, Mac U was able to take 2 games out of 3 versus Oklahoma City. The game scores went as follows. Mac U took games 1 and 3. Game one was 8-3 Mac U. Game two, 10-6 OCU. And game three was 18-8, which I believe, Taylor, correct me if I'm wrong, that was a run rule.
Yeah, run ruled there in the eighth inning as Macu in Game 3 was able to put up a 10 spot in the top of the eighth, really just kind of forcing the hand of Oklahoma City to run through multiple pitchers. And DeAndre Gaines had a big day. It was an explosion by the offense. Got the back and forth ball game. I mean, OCU was up 5-1 early on, and it just kind of went back and forth with both teams going yard. It was a super impressive day, but ultimately that 10-run eighth inning ended up slamming the door there. Of course, Isaac Baez in Game 1 faced off against Cade Shatwell, and Macu uh, got to him a little bit, got to the right-hander who's looked super impressive. Of course, Baez is now the all-time NAIA wins leader at the program, like we had mentioned. Game 2 as well. Macu super impressive too with the bats, and then the pitching staff all throughout. And in that Game 3, we're just really able to go to anyone there in the bullpen and ended up being able to take care of the job here. And it was a really super impressive series by the Evangels.
Very sound performance from Mac U there. Number 23, Reinhardt continues their impressive performances, taking 2 games out of 3 against Milligan. Milligan would take games 1, and Reinhardt would take games 2 and 3. Scores were 7-6 Milligan in game 1, and then 16-8 in game 2, and 8-4 in game 3, all, both in favor for Reinhardt.
Yeah, Reinhardt has been red hot, and they continue this against another red hot team in Milligan. Bouncing back from that Game 1 loss, a close loss at that, obviously with the 1-run ball game, but putting up 16 runs there to kind of set the tone for that next one. They're in control there in Game 3 as they were able to take the 4-run victory. And the Eagles have looked super impressive after that somewhat slow start, obviously with the tough schedule that they always play. But Reinhardt with a super impressive series win here against Milligan, and they look to continue that momentum as the season goes on.
Taylor, before we get into our big series of the week recap, I'm going to let you go ahead and take this last one because I am sure you were very happy to see your alma mater take down number 21 Texas Wesleyan in a 3-game set.
Yeah, like I mentioned last week, the I took the Fighting Joe Blackwells, and they made me look smart, as he said, with a super impressive doubleheader sweep there in on day one, 10-2. They lit up Jorge Carvalho, who I've talked about a lot this year as one of the best bullpen arms in the conference. He got the start that day. Jose Casado hasn't pitched in a while, but Texas Wesleyan, as we know, has a load of arms there at the helm. And SCU took it to him. I mean, Yours Gomez was a huge standout with a 2-homer day. Dario Paredes swung it well. On the mound, too, Henry Ogondo and Gabriel Figueroa both delivered 7 inning performances there in the doubleheader sweep. Texas Wesleyan obviously salvaged that game 3, but overall it was a dominant weekend by the Eagles and shake things up definitely in the Sooner Athletic Conference standings to start the year.
It always has to be nice to see, as being an alumni, it has to be nice seeing the program that you left continue to succeed. So I'm sure that made you very happy this weekend watching those final scores. But that does take us to the big series of the week last week, which was down in Montgomery, Alabama, as receiving votes Loyola took on Faulkner. Faulkner would take 2 out of the 3 games, taking games 1 and 2 by scores of 11-4 and 4-1, and then Loyola coming into game 3, avoiding that sweep with an 11-4 win.
Yeah, the Eagles, like we had said last week, they seem to be back and they kind of asserted themselves here, taking those first 2 games, 11-4 and 4-1, winning multiple ways, like I mentioned before. Samir Rojas went 7 innings with 1 hit and 1 earned run there in game 2 against a really good Loyola team, as we know. But game 1 ended up setting the tone for the series, and then Loyola ended up salvaging that game 3 by the same score of 11-4. Steven Still was impressive there too as well. But overall, Faulkner's looked really, really good this year. They also got a big win today over a team we just mentioned in Reinhardt in some midweek action. The Eagles look super, super impressive to start the year. And just like I said last week, makes the Southern States even tougher.
Faulkner team right on the cusp of busting into that top 25, which we will get into later. But Taylor, that does bring us to shout outs and mentions, individual performances from this week. We do have quite a few, so let's go ahead and run down this list. Shout these guys out who just performed this past week. I will kick things off here with Houston Victoria starting pitcher Mason Longoria. Mason threw a 9 inning complete game shutout with a career high 12 strikeouts, only allowing 4 hits versus Xavier in Louisiana.
And getting into our next shout out I mentioned of the week, Oklahoma Panhandle State starting pitcher Colby Dietich with a 7 inning performance, a complete game, 2 hit, 13K with 1 earned run against a really good Wayland Baptist offense there in the victory.
Taylor, go ahead and take this next one from your alma mater.
Like I mentioned earlier, Southwestern Christian infielder Yours Gomez with a big weekend in the a big week, if you will, against both McPherson and in the weekend series against Texas Wesleyan. 9 for 17 with a double, 2 homers, 5 runs scored, 7 RBIs. Like I mentioned, a 2-homer game and a 4-for-4 performance against Texas Wesleyan. A big shout out goes to Gomez and the Eagles.
A lot of familiar names this week in our shout outs and mentions. One you should know by now, and if you don't know, you need to know. Blue Mountain Christian outfielder Pico Townsend went 7 for 14, hitting 5 home runs, recording 12 RBIs, and scoring 9 runs himself versus Tougaloo and in the 3-game sweep over number 18 Mobile.
West Virginia Tech starting pitcher Robert Kelly with a 9 inning complete game shutout with 4 hits allowed and 15 strikeouts in the victory against receiving votes Midway squad.
Indiana Westland starting pitcher Drew Young, a 9 inning complete game shutout, allowing 4 hits and 9 Ks versus Marion.
Even more incredible pitching performances. We get a Northwestern College in Iowa starting pitcher Brad Torno, a 7 inning performance, 16 Ks in a complete game shutout with only 2 hits allowed, carried a no-hitter into the 7th inning against Valley City State.
I believe Brad Torno was perfect in that one through 4. I'd have to double check on that, but nonetheless, what an impressive performance. There are a lot of just incredible pitching performances this week, and it seems like, every time we go through shout outs and mentions, next week it's like, okay, well, it can't get much better than this, but it continues to get better. So there are a lot of guys balling out this year, and I am loving to see these stat lines, especially from my pitchers here. Moving on, we have Wiley College first baseman Ivan Del Villar, 9 for 15 with a double, 2 home runs, one of which was a grand slam, recording 8 RBIs and scoring 6 runs himself versus Dillard.
Next up, we have Clark University catcher Thomas Brannon in what was a wild series against Missouri Valley. 10 for 17 on the weekend with 3 doubles, 2 homers, and 11 RBIs.
That was a wild weekend. What was the final of that one game? Where didn't both teams combine for over 40 runs?
Yeah, I believe it was the stat we put out on the weekend that both teams combined for 88 runs on the, or excuse me, 88 hits and 66 runs on the weekend there in
That's
in the 3 game set.
ridiculous.
Ball was flying in Missouri, that's for sure. It was some incredible offensive numbers all throughout.
I would love to see how that field plays. I've never played there. Missouri Valley would always come to McPherson to play us, so we never got to play at their field. But I imagine it's got to be somewhat of a bang box if they're putting up numbers like that this weekend. But going back down to Wiley College, starting pitcher Keon Guillory, 7 innings pitched, shutout, 4 hits, and 12 Ks versus that Dillard team.
Next up, we have Kaiser starting pitcher Danny Galvin, a 7 inning performance, complete game shutout with 7 hits allowed and 14 strikeouts in the victory against Brighton and Stratton.
I got to say, I'm not surprised to see Danny Galvin up here again. He continues to perform. In the Sun Conference, Weber International infielder Ryan Riccio, 7 for 12, 2 home runs, 9 RBIs, and scoring 6 runs versus Lawrence Tech, number 7 Bellevue, Morningside, and Aquinas, which is in Michigan.
Next up, we have Peru State starting pitcher Kevin Diaz, 7 innings pitched, 13 Ks, and a complete game shutout versus Culver Stockton. Big shout out goes to Kevin.
Another familiar name here, very familiar name, Bryan College third baseman Bryson Lofton, 7 for 13, 538 average on the weekend, 3 home runs, 8 RBIs versus Union College.
And finally, we have William Penn starting pitcher Abdel Medueno in the victory against number 22 Central Methodist. 6 2/3, 3 hits, 1 earned, and 12 strikeouts in what was an 8-1 victory for William Penn.
That's going to wrap up our shout outs and mentions. Taylor, I got to say, there were some crazy, crazy, crazy performances this week. We try to get all of them that are in here. If you guys, for those of you who don't know how to submit, if you don't follow us on X, which you should be doing, by the way, or Instagram, you need to be doing that. But submit your guys, your teammates. If you're a parent, submit your kid's friend, submit your teammates, guys, with lights out performances, and we will get them in our shout outs and mentions. We would love to highlight all of you who perform across the nation. And Taylor, we did highlight a bunch of performances there, but we do have to highlight the best performances from this week when that brings us to the NAIA Ball hitter, pitcher, and team of the week, which is brought to you by Play in Sports. We would like to remind you that all of our Player of the Week awards for the entire 2024 season are brought to you by our friends over at Play in Sports. They offer fantastic, seamless event management software that programs around the nation trust. Please check them out today for your camp or team needs at www.playandsports.com, or you can check them out on X and hit them with a follow at Play and Sports USA today. So looking at our hitter of the week, this guy, we mentioned him earlier. What an insane performance this weekend. It is none other than USAO's Peyton McDowell. Peyton went 11 for 15, recording 2 doubles, a triple, and hitting 4 home runs, recording 10 RBIs, scoring 8 runs. Taylor, he hit 733 this weekend against USW, University of the Southwest, that is, down in Hobbs, New Mexico.
Yeah, that was another, like we had mentioned with Missouri Valley and Clark. That was an incredible offensive weekend down there in Hobbs, and highlighted by McDowell and Chris Martinez both. But McDowell, I mean, he's been a staple for the Drovers over the past few years. Had some incredible moments. Always seems to step up in the big moments of that too. And all-time home run leader at a program like USAO. That is a super great accomplishment, and from an incredible hitter like we had saw. I mean, 11 for 15 is crazy over the weekend. They really could not get him out.
Yeah, once McDowell really gets hit in his groove and hitting his stride, which it looks like he's right there, that USAO team is going to be scary to face. And Taylor, we obviously highlighted a number of insane pitching performances this weekend and week in general, but this guy lights out, obviously, high strikeout game here. Pitcher of the week, NAIA ball pitcher of the week goes to Sean Hepner from University of British Columbia, our friends up north. Sean threw six and a third innings pitched, only allowing one hit, one earned run, and striking out 16 batters versus College of Idaho. His 16 strikeout game set a new Cascade Collegiate Conference record for most strikeouts in a single game.
Yeah, and you think about that conference and the pitching it's had over the over its history. I mean, that's impressive that no one's done that before. But Hepner and UBC, I mean, this it's been a program with some really good arms over the past few years, and obviously Hepner with a 16K performance and only one hit too. I mean, that was incredible. Like you had said, a lot of great shout outs and mentions, a lot of great pitching performances. But Hepner definitely takes it with this performance, setting the record in the conference like the Cascade. That's super impressive, no doubt.
Obviously, a lot of great performances pitching on the bump this weekend, but Sean Hepner really drove that home, especially with that conference record. But that does bring us to the team of the week. And this team is a team to be on the lookout for if you aren't yet. You're going to get to know them very quickly as I do see them hanging around. Any eyeball team of the week goes to Blue Mountain Christian. Blue Mountain Christian went 4-0 on the week with a midweek win over Tougaloo and a weekend sweep, like I had mentioned earlier, over number 18 Mobile. Blue Mountain Christian outscored their opponents 52-22. They recorded 53 hits, 10 of which were doubles. They had 15 stolen bases and they hit 8 home runs as a team. And Pico Townsend hit 5 of those 8 home runs himself.
Yeah, Pico Townsend's been a name that we've mentioned almost every week now with some incredible performances, and he's not slowing down anytime soon there. And Blue Mountain Christian as a whole, I mean, a 4-0 week there and putting up 52 runs in 4 games, that's incredible. And they've came out red hot, and like we had said with the Southern States, it just continues to get better and better and better. And with an offensive performance like this, and what seems to be a weekly thing for the Rams there at Blue Mountain Christian, it's only going to continue to be more talented as the weeks continue into conference play there.
Very good matchup for Blue Mountain Christian coming up this weekend. We will get into that later, but there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, the NAIA ball hitter, pitcher, and team of the week, which is brought to you by our friends at Play In Sports. Taylor, we mentioned this last week, I believe, and it's unfortunate that we are recording this on Tuesday as the first coaches poll is going to be releasing tomorrow on Wednesday the 13th. But yesterday on the 11th, we did get the very first conference ratings poll. And for those of you who don't know, the conference ratings poll does have very big implications on what the top 25 coaches poll will look like. So obviously, a lot of these conferences, Taylor, they do rate differently. Some of them have committees, but all of them, all of their votes are submitted to a conference rater. And I think looking at the first conference ratings poll, this is really going to shake up the coaches poll when it drops tomorrow on Wednesday the 13th.
Yeah, and we it's something we've talked about, and quite frankly, everyone has really seen over the season so far. A lot of blue blood teams all across the country. Really, a lot of names you would just think that would automatically be in the top 10, 15, 20 range. They've dropped some games that really are kind of surprising to see as losses on their schedule. Really, like I said, all throughout across the country, it's really going to shake things up here tomorrow as that first coaches poll comes out. A lot of teams that started out in the coaches poll probably won't be in that coaches poll here on March 13th, and it's going to be really crazy to see as where they put teams in. We obviously have the conference ratings, like you mentioned. A lot of conferences too are kind of tight right now. I mean, it's super tough to tell. I mean, just who's going to be in that poll once we look at things tomorrow.
Yeah, there are a lot of conferences that appear as of right now to be wide open, as there are some conferences who have not yet gotten into conference play yet, but there are a few that look wide open. I'd love to, obviously we can't get through all of them, but there are quite a few that I think are worth noting. So starting off here, I'd love to dive into the American Midwest, where we have, according to the ratings right now, Missouri Baptist coming in at 1. Obviously, the American Midwest is one of these conferences that has not yet started conference play, but historically it is generally Missouri Baptist and Columbia, fighting for that top spot in the American Midwest. But this one looks to be wide open as, we have Missouri Baptist at 13-7, and then Columbia right behind them at 15-10. And then on top of that, you have two more 15-win teams right behind them at William Baptist at 15-5 and Central Baptist at 15-6. This is shaping up to be a tight race in the American Midwest.
Yeah, absolutely. With Missouri Baptist obviously coming in at number 10 there in the preseason poll to start out. And like we had mentioned, a team has looked really, really talented at time and looked like a top 10 team, but with a lot of craziness going on throughout the country, especially in that conference too. Columbia was a receiving votes team in that preseason poll. They've also dropped some games that we really didn't expect them to drop. So in that conference, like you had said, you have the kind of the two top dogs historically, but even with teams with 15 wins both right behind them there in the 3 and 4 spots in the ratings, that one's going to be super interesting to see how things shake up as the season progresses.
Yeah, and preseason Missouri Baptist coming in at 10, and then you look at some of the losses they have on their record this season, you know, we got to sit there and think, obviously we'll get into some hot takes later, but it's almost thinking it's like, where does that put them? Because Columbia is a receiving votes team, but Columbia will not be ranked ahead of Missouri Baptist in this poll. So where does Missouri Baptist fall? And then in return, does that bump Columbia out of receiving votes contention? Does it bump them in and Missouri Baptist drops? That's going to be interesting to see. I think this coaches poll tomorrow is going to be shaken up quite a bit from what the preseason poll was. But, another conference that is really out of the ordinary, typically Tennessee Westland usually dominates this conference with relative ease, but the Appalachian Athletic Conference with Reinhardt at 1 and Milligan at 2, and then Tennessee Westland at 3. This conference right here, I believe, is going to be shaking up the top 25 a lot because we had Tennessee Westland coming in at preseason number 6, and then you're looking at two teams in front of them in Milligan and Reinhardt that would have to be ranked in front of them. So we're looking at a scenario here where, we potentially have a top 10 team dropping out completely of the top 25, or Reinhardt and Milligan. I believe Reinhardt will be a lock in this top 25 poll. I think that's fair to say, Taylor, but has Milligan made enough, have they performed enough to make a case to get into that top 25? And if not, we're looking at potentially Tennessee Westland dropping out for the first time in probably years.
Right. Yeah. Like we had said, I mean, just a lot of blue bloods, especially in the modern era too, with the Bulldogs under Coach Billy Barry. I mean, they were national champions in 2019. They're pretty much a staple in the World Series. And to see them, I believe it's at 5 conference losses already right now, really struggling early on. And when you look into that conference rating, of course, with them being third in that rating, I don't know. And it would be really weird to see a number 6 team in the preseason poll, especially a team with the history of Tennessee Wesleyan to be completely out. But that is a very strong possibility when we look at it tomorrow. Reinhardt, of course, has looked really impressive down the stretch here. Milligan, as they took him on in that series, too, has looked super impressive. And I feel like they're at this time well deserving of those 1 and 2 spots there. But really, really interesting to see if the Bulldogs will be in this poll tomorrow at all.
Yeah, and I mean, if we're going to talk about top 10 teams, preseason top 10 teams dropping out completely, another one you have to mention out of the North Star is Bellevue. They've had a rough go, and it's looking like they might, at least the very least, drop out of the top 10, but they could even, it's very possible they could drop all the way out with some of the losses they've had this year.
Yeah, no question about it. Another team like Tennessee Wesleyan, over the past 5 to 10 years, especially, I mean, the Bruins have gone to back-to-back World Series, and this year they dropped some games that, despite the tough scheduling, that they normally win. And if you have number 6 and number 7 there that we just mentioned, I mean, they could completely be out of the poll. They could be from the 2025 range. But if that happens, where do you put those teams that have looked really impressive and are higher than their conference foes in other conferences in that 20 to 25 range? It's you can kind of go a lot of different ways with this. And to think about it, like we said, to think about a couple of blue bloods, possibly not in the top 25, that would, I don't know. I don't even know when the last time that would have ever happened, but it would be really crazy to see.
Yeah, and looking at more top 10 teams that are at risk, Taylor is one of them out of Indiana, and then in that Crossroads League. Taylor coming in at 1, though. They are 4-2 in conference, 11-9 on the year. So they have started to pick it back up after a very rough start to the season. And then preseason number 14, Indiana Wesleyan coming in right behind them at second in the Crossroads League. Have both of these teams made strong enough cases for the NAI to keep two Crossroads teams in the top 25? I don't know if they've made that case, because Taylor struggled to start the year and they were preseason number 9. Indiana Wesleyan, yes, they have a good conference record, but I don't know compared to some of these other teams, because we haven't even gotten into the GSAC yet, and the GSAC is loaded with talent, and I think I could very well see all 5 of those GSAC teams that are 1 through 5 in the top 25. So then you look at the Crossroads League with Taylor and Indiana Wesleyan, it's kind of like, where do you put them? Like, is Indiana Wesleyan at risk for dropping all the way out? Is Taylor going to fall into that 15 to 25 range? It's hard to look at with powerhouse conferences like the GSAC that are just loaded with talent and teams that, quite frankly, in my opinion, should all be in the top 25.
Yeah, no doubt. And when mentioning the GSAC too, I mean, Jessup, like we had said and talked about almost every episode now, with that incredible offense, they can really swing it, and they've looked super impressive to start the year. Hope International, of course, a team that has been to the World Series, has been right there on the cusp too over the past few seasons. Ottawa, Arizona has looked really impressive with taking down Taylor there on opening weekend, and then Taylor and Indiana Wesleyan, 2 teams in the World Series last year, like we had said, could very well not be in this top 25 poll. When you look at the GSAC too, there is a lot of talent in the GSAC. Of course, losing Westmont last year, the 2023 national champions, to Division Two. But Jessup has stepped up. Hope is still Hope. Ottawa, Arizona has really, really stepped up. And all 3 of those teams have a strong case to be in this poll tomorrow.
Well, with Jessup coming in at 1 at 20-4 is what it's looking like here. They're going to be in the top 25 in my opinion. I think Jessup is a team that is going to make an appearance in the top 25, and then this is going to come back to what we were just talking about with Tennessee Wesleyan. We have Hope, who was preseason 11, and then Hope in that return can't be ranked higher than Jessup. So where are we going to put Jessup, and how far down is that going to drop Hope? And then Ottawa, Arizona, they've had one hell of a year so far, 19-7 overall. I feel like they've made a very strong case to be in that top 25, but where are you going to put them? I mean, how far is Hope going to drop? Is there a spot for Ottawa, Arizona, or are they going to be a receiving votes team? That's the GSAC is going to be probably, in my opinion, the toughest to sort out for who gets in the top 25, because we had preseason Vanguard number 17, preseason number 17, and they're 5th in the GSAC. So to me, what it's looking like here is Vanguard's going to be out.
Yeah, I can see that too. And that's another, I mean, postseason like perennial power there.
That's going to
In
be out of the top 25 most likely.
Yeah, it's incredible to think about. I mean, we haven't even gotten to the rest of the conferences here that kind of have somewhat of the same scenarios, but like we had said, just kind of a lot of parity around the country right now. With Vanguard, like I believe that they will be out of the top 25 right there with you, of course,
They
being
have to
5th in
be.
that conference ratings. Yeah, and I mean, Jessup has just been rolling through this conference to start the year, and especially at the start of conference play there, as we had mentioned, taking down Ottawa, Arizona. But they look to be the GSAC favorites right now. Obviously, that kind of shows in the conference ratings. I believe that Jessup could be in the 15 to 20 range, possibly. But like you had said, where does that put those other teams? It's you can go a lot of different ways at this, and it's super fun to kind of go down all of these avenues that we have right now.
It is, because is Jessup strong enough to make that jump from not even receiving votes to that 10 to 15 range, to where Hope drops a couple spots? Because yes, Hope's had a little bit of a slow start to the year, but I mean, they're 6-3 in conference. Jessup and Hope have the same conference record, and Hope is still very much a top 25 team. But how far up is Jessup going to be, and then how far down is Hope going to drop them? And then, you know, Ottawa, Arizona, I feel, in my opinion, has a very strong case to get in, but how many GSAC teams are going to get in? We don't know. But in my opinion, 1 through 5 are all top 25 caliber teams. But, I just don't see them putting 5 GSAC teams in the top 25. I mean, they could, but I highly doubt it. So I think this one is going to be the most interesting conference to see exactly how it plays out tomorrow when this drops. But, another one, moving on from the GSAC, because I think we could probably sit here the
Yeah.
rest of the episode and debate the GSAC because there's so many good teams right now. But if we look at the Great Plains Athletic Conference, you obviously they have not started conference yet, but you have Doane sitting atop of the mountain, number one, 14-2, and then Concordia right behind him at 16-5. And Doane starting off preseason receiving votes. I do believe this is a team that has made a very solid case to be in that top 25, probably somewhere in that 15 to 25 range, probably more, in the latter half there. But Concordia as well, man. They've had a really good start to the year. Obviously, big series of the week winner a couple years ago, or not years ago, a couple weeks ago, excuse me. But I think Concordia is a team that you almost have to put in there as well.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you there. Concordia, they can really swing it. We mentioned Jessup. I mean, Concordia 1 through 9. It's going to be a tough out of the nation's home run leader Jaden Quinn and Joey Gabransky that we mentioned there in the big series of the week against Kaiser a few weeks back, and Doane too. Doane has had some really impressive victories on their resume to start the season. Of course, going down to Oklahoma City and with an arm like Aaron Forrest, Caden Crawford right behind him. I do believe Doane's going to should be in this top 25. Obviously, like you said, we haven't started conference play there in the GPAC, but the Tigers and both the Bulldogs look really good, and it's a strong possibility that both of these teams could be ranked. But I mean, we shall see. It's super confusing to kind of look at, as we had, like I'd said, a lot of blue bloods kind of drop games that they really don't normally do.
Just seems like that, yeah, that the problem is that there are a lot of, perennial powerhouse teams that are losing games they shouldn't be losing, and they're dropping farther and farther in these conference ratings to where they're kind of putting themselves at risk to just going from preseason ranked to not ranked at all. And I think, moving to a conference that I'm going to be talking quite a bit about here, because this is looking at the standings, it almost reminds me of the KCAC of old. Oklahoma wasn't at the top, 11-1 in conference so far, 15-7 overall. Right behind them, I got to say, I personally, being spending my 4 years at McPherson, I do not think I would have ever seen Friends rated higher than possibly fifth. And Friends comes in right behind Oklahoma Wesleyan at number two, 7-5 in conference, 16-8 overall. Tabor at 3, 10-2 in conference, 11-6 overall. And the preseason number 16 ranked nationally team, Kansas Wesleyan, 8-4 in conference, 14-7, coming in at 4. I think I know where I want to start with this, but there's so much to be said because the past few years, you're so used to seeing Kansas Wesleyan generally right at number one there, followed by McPherson, followed by Tabor. Tabor or Ottawa, you could flip flop both of those, and then followed by Oklahoma Wesleyan. Oklahoma Wesleyan in that 4 to 6 range the past couple years, and now they're back to the Oklahoma Wesleyan of old, at least when I entered the KCAC, where they were just rolling everybody, and that's what they've done so far this year. But if we're going to look at top 25 here, I personally don't think Oklahoma Wesleyan is a team you can put in there just yet. Yeah, they have a great conference record so far, but I don't believe that they have not played Kansas Wesleyan yet. I know they just split today on Tuesday the 12th with Tabor. But I don't think Oklahoma Wesleyan team is going to go into that top 25. If they do, it's going to be that 20 to 25 range. But I do think that this Oku squad is going to be coming in this poll at receiving votes, which that very well means Kansas Wesleyan is going to drop out unless, because I do not see a scenario where Oklahoma Wesleyan, Friends, and Tabor are all ranked. And if they were, it would be in that 15 to 25 range. And I do not see that happening. Yes, Friends has had a fantastic year to start the year, probably one of the best in recent memory. But I don't think they've made the strong enough case yet. Yes, they did sweep K-Dub, Kansas Wesleyan, but I don't think you can put them in that top 25 yet. And then we're looking at Kansas Wesleyan potentially probably dropping out of this top 25 come tomorrow. But I don't think anyone from the KCAC is gonna get in because we have Oklahoma Wesleyan. They were not receiving votes in the preseason poll. They've looked good conference so far. Kansas Wesleyan's going to drop for me at least in my opinion, because there's no way, Taylor, that I see Tabor, Friends, and Oklahoma Wesleyan all being in that top 25. At the very least, not the very least, the very best, Kansas Wesleyan will still remain a receiving votes team because the people, the conferences know the type of team Kansas Wesleyan is. So I do think, at the very most, they will remain a receiving votes team.
Yeah, I agree with you there, and it's obviously very good insight to have you being in the KCAC. Myself here with the Sooner too, but the KCAC, like you said, Kansas Wesleyan over recent years, Ottawa, who was in an opening round 2 years ago. I mean, Oklahoma Wesleyan right there at the top, but yeah, I don't know, but they would have the resume because they've even dropped some tough games that they normally don't drop to start the year here, despite being number one in that conference rating. Kansas Wesleyan, I really don't see them being in the poll with their conference rating right now, despite, like you said, a really, really good offensive squad with some big time bats in the lineup. But even then, I mean, it's super tough to kind of shake out here, especially in a conference like you had said. It's usually normally has around 2 to 3 teams right there in the top 25, if not 4 receiving votes. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see come tomorrow. I don't think Oklahoma Wesleyan's going to be in that poll, but I mean, we shall see.
It's incredibly interesting to see because, after my departure from the KCAC this year, I knew going into this year everything was going to be shaking up because obviously McPherson lost a lot of guys. Kansas Wesleyan, probably out of the remaining teams in the KCAC, was probably the team other than Tabor who really did not lose that many guys. So I knew these standings were going to shake up quite a bit. And Oklahoma Wesleyan, we know Oklahoma Wesleyan, they are going to add guys, add guys, add guys. They are a draw, being a perennial powerhouse, if you will, at least in the KCAC. But yeah, man, like hot take, I don't see anyone in the KCAC getting in this poll. I really don't. I don't think the resumes are strong. Kansas Wesleyan's drop games, not teams, to maybe some like a team like Friends who they generally wouldn't. So I don't think, despite the caliber of these teams, I don't think the resumes are there. I do think a conference like the GSAC will make it tough for a KCAC squad to get in. So this is one I'm going to have my eye on tomorrow. But personally, I do not see anybody from the KCAC getting in. At the very best, Oklahoma Wesleyan receiving votes. That's the closest I see to anybody, to any team in the KCAC getting in. But I'm excited to see how these ratings and standings kind of play out through the remainder of the year because this KCAC race is wide open, if you ask me. If we look at number 5, we have Avila at number 5. They've been bottom half of the conference, ever since they joined us. So seeing a team like that start to, succeed is quite literally amazing to see because that top 6, because Kansas Wesleyan are not Kansas Wesleyan, KCAC has 6 teams listed here. Avila and Friends generally are not part of that top 6 teams to make it in this ratings poll. So KCAC definitely a conference to watch out for as it is wide open for who's going to take that one.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, Friends has had an incredible year. Friends has picked up a win against USAO. I mean, they've had some great wins. But like I said, a lot of teams have dropped a lot of games all throughout the country, not just in the KCAC, but they normally don't drop. And it really makes it rating this poll super, super challenging.
If we're going to be going down the path of speaking about alma mater conferences, Taylor, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn the microphone over to you so you can give us some insight on what you think is going to go down in the Sooner Athletic.
Yeah, when looking at the Sooner, obviously you have Oklahoma City, USAO, Texas Wesleyan right there at the top normally every single year with those 3. Both Oklahoma City and USAO are receiving votes in the preseason poll. Texas Wesleyan started off at 21. But Texas Wesleyan has some tough losses this year. Obviously dropped that series that we mentioned to Southwestern Christian. USAO has some tough losses this year. Oklahoma City, despite having kind of righted the ship a little bit and has looked impressive over the last few weeks. To start off, they had a rough stretch there at the middle part of February to start the season. Mid-America Christian and just took that series from Oklahoma City and obviously has a win against Missouri Baptist team and LSU Shreveport, one of their only losses on the year. I mean, it's super challenging to rate the Sooner Athletic Conference that when I was playing what you normally had, Oklahoma City, USAO in the top almost 5, definitely top 10, but really pushing for top 5. Texas Wesleyan there in the top 15. The Sooner may only get one team in tomorrow, but Texas Wesleyan starting out ranked 21st. Like I said, tough losses, so they may very well fall out of the poll. You can go a lot of different ways here in the Sooner, and those top 4 teams right there, even Southwestern Christian too. As the conference play gets later on into the season, we'll be able to shake things out. But right now, with those 4, like we mentioned, Texas Wesleyan, Oklahoma City, USAO, and MACU, it's going to be tough to see one of these teams ranked in the poll. I believe a few may be receiving votes, but even then, it wouldn't shock me to see the Sooner left out completely of the top 25 coaches poll or receiving votes for that matter.
I absolutely agree. I think with the season Texas Wesleyan's had so far, not overly impressive, but doing just enough to stay there, stay relevant. Like you said, coming in at preseason 21, I think the only way USAO does get in this poll is if Texas Wesleyan somehow moves up, which I don't see that being the case. I do think they might slide down a couple spots or completely drop out into that receiving votes section there, which I mean, I think that would have to leave USAO. I believe USAO is still going to receive votes here in this poll, at the very least, but their saving grace is going to be if Texas Wesleyan somehow moves up a couple spots in that poll to where USAO can kind of squeak into that 20 to 25 range, which I do think they have the caliber of team to be considered for top 25 contention or top 25 placement rather, but it's all going to depend on what happens with Texas Wesleyan. But like you said, I do see a scenario playing out where the Sooners left out completely, much like the KCAC.
Yeah, no question about it. It's super, super weird to see. Like I said, normally have the 2 teams there in the top 5, like the Sun Conference kind of is now and has been over the past few years. It's with a conference like that and such a storied conference at that. I mean, it's going to be really weird to see if we don't see a team both from the KCAC and the Sooner in the top 25 tomorrow.
It's been a very intriguing year. There are a lot of teams, making their appearances this year, kind of making themselves known nationally, if you will. So seeing the NAI kind of switch up like this with, teams getting in there that, maybe you haven't heard of. It's making things interesting. And, a lot of powerhouse teams kind of falling off. Like we mentioned Tennessee Wesleyan earlier. Another one we have to mention that's probably going to drop out, Taylor, is preseason number 4, William Carey out of the Southern States. They come in at number 5 in the conference ratings poll.
Yeah, we could have a scenario tomorrow where we have at least 3 top 10 teams in the preseason poll completely out of the top 25 in that first coaches poll tomorrow. William Carey, like you said, number 4 team in the country, has taken down Georgia Gwinnett this year. One of Georgia Gwinnett's only a few losses this year. But like I said, another blue blood that's dropped some games they normally don't drop. And if you would have told me when the season started a little over a month and a half ago that we would have 3 preseason top 10 teams possibly out of the first top 25 poll completely, I probably would have laughed in your face. But that's a very possible scenario right now as we sit on March 12th.
For me, William Carey is out completely. I don't think they're receiving votes. I mean, they might, but they are completely out for me because in order for them to get in, we're talking about 4 teams in front of them all needing to be ranked, which I do think Faulkner and Loyola, I do think both of those teams get in. They've proven themselves. Faulkner, especially of late. I do think Faulkner and Loyola do get into that top 25. I do believe they are locks. Maybe not locks, but they are for sure in, at least in my opinion. But a team like Point and Thomas, both out of Georgia, decent records to start the year. Point has been playing very well, but I don't think the resume is there quite yet to make that jump into the top 25, which then in return that does mean William Carey is going to go from number 4 to out completely, which is mind-blowing. Like you just mentioned, teams like Bellevue, William Carey, and Tennessee Wesleyan all going from top 10 to dropping out just should show you how crazy of a season this has been so far.
Yeah, no question. I mean, we've mentioned possibly five World Series teams from last year completely out of this top 25 poll that were ranked once again in the top 10, top 15. I mean, it's super confusing to see. Obviously, if you'd have told us that back in the World Series last year, I mean, wow, that would be, I mean, a huge shock, especially with some blue bloods, like you said, Tennessee Wesleyan, Bellevue, William Carey, especially with both of these 3 with a very good possibility of not being ranked here on as we'll sit on March 13th tomorrow. I mean, that'd be shocking. That'd be shocking to say the least.
Yeah, for me, William Carey's out. I think Point is just on the outside looking in, but we will see tomorrow. Looking at the Red River Athletic Conference, Shreveport coming in at number one. No surprise there. They are going to remain probably in that top five there. But a team looking in that is right behind them at 16-5, Louisiana Christian. Now, I know maybe their strength of schedule is not quite there yet or is not there at all, but 16-5 on the year, 7-2 in conference so far. I do think they make a little bit of a case to at least be considered for top 25.
Yeah, no question, especially with the madness that is around the country. Louisiana Christian I could see him receiving votes tomorrow, but like you said, strong case to be in the top 25 there, being second in that conference poll. And like you mentioned, blue blood teams not even being third or fourth in their conference ratings. With Louisiana Christian, we saw them at the Cajun Collision. They look like a talented team, no doubt, and obviously took a big win against Loyola today too. But the Wildcats there, I mean, they have a really strong case with that 16-5 record, like you mentioned, right behind LSU Shreveport in conference play. Have yet to match up. That should be a fun one once we get to that. But the Wildcats very well could be in the top 25 tomorrow with all this craziness around the nation.
Yeah, because I mean, the way you look at it, if you have three top 10 teams dropping out, most likely for sure, completely. Bellevue might not drop out completely, but Tennessee Wesleyan and William Carey were probably both looking at dropping out completely. That's just opening up more slots for these new teams to jump right in there. And I think Louisiana Christian could be one of those teams. Coming in at second in their conference. Yes, like if you look at a conference like the GSAC, who has powerhouses 1 through 5, but they're probably not going to take 5 GSAC teams. So, you look at a team like Louisiana Christian coming in at number 2 in their conference, that might be a team in consideration. But Taylor, another conference that I personally believe is not going to make an appearance at all is the River States Conference. You have Point Park, who was preseason number 20. They're 9-7 on the year overall. I do think that Point Park drops out of this poll tomorrow.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you 100%. Point Park starting off the year a little bit slow, but being at number 20, that it's a little room for error there. And like we had said, a lot of teams going to be dropping into that poll. I do believe Point Park's one of those teams, and that leaves obviously one more slot open to start the year. I mean, it's crazy to think about a lot of teams that we normally don't see there in that 20 to 25 range, even the 10 to 20 range could very well be in this poll tomorrow with all the madness going on. I mean, it's super confusing to look at, and you can kind of go a lot of different ways with a lot of different teams and quite literally every conference around the country.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of conferences with that are just completely left out, and I do think River State's is probably going to be one of those conferences. But Taylor, like thinking in my head 1 through 5, I think once I'm going to be incredibly interested to see where this poll has teams 5 through 10, because if you look at William Carey dropping out, Tennessee Wesleyan dropping out, Bellevue dropping out, Taylor probably dropping out of the top 10, who is going to make that jump into the top 10, and I'm excited to see that because I can't even tell you who I would put in that top 10.
Yeah, I really don't have a good guess right now either. Honestly, aside from really the top four that we kind of mentioned there, and Gwinnett, Lewis and Clark, maybe. I mean, Shreveport, and of course Southeastern too, who we'll touch on later in the episode. I mean, that's really kind of only the locks right now in my head, at least. And after that, after the top five, I mean, it gets real crazy real fast.
Yeah, it's gonna. I think this is probably going to be one of the crazier coaches poll in recent memory. There's going to be a lot of shakeups there and a lot of teams that you're not used to seeing that are going to be in that top 25. So, but last but not least, you have to talk about the Sun Conference. We have Southeastern, no surprise, coming in at 1, followed by Weber International, and then Kaiser and Ave Maria at 4. For me, Ave Maria was preseason, I believe, number 14. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, Taylor. But for me, at 8-8, they have not started conference play yet, but at 8-8, Ave Maria is out for me, and I think Kaiser's in at 18-4. I think we are going to have 3 Sun Conference teams in this poll tomorrow.
Yeah, I can see that too. I do agree with you. I do think Ave is going to be out of this poll. Of course, Southeastern and Weber obviously are locks. They're going
Top
to
five
be in.
locks for sure. I think
Yeah,
Weber is a team that's
yeah,
going to be top five.
yeah, easy. But I mean, there's also a scenario too where Kaiser may not get into this poll. Like we said, Ave for sure I think would be out, but I mean Kaiser having a good record to start the year, of course, going down as a loss there in that series to Concordia, Nebraska, which obviously you can look at to be ranked ahead of Kaiser in this poll with that series victory. It's really interesting to see it, especially a conference like the Sun Conference where we normally have even St. Thomas. St. Thomas has had kind of a rough stretch after the Cajun collision throughout the season here. They were receiving votes. I don't obviously they won't be in this poll, but a team like Kaiser too has a strong case, but you can go a lot of different ways, especially with some opponents that they have in the past.
Yeah, I really think we are going to have three Sun Conference teams tomorrow. Kaiser at 18-4. That's a pretty looking record, man. And they've competed very well. So I think, for me, it's almost like if Concordia is in that top 25, Kaiser's got to be right there with them. Either just right behind them or a couple spots behind them. But for me, Kaiser is in. You look at the record compared to some of the other teams around the nation, they have a very good record compared to a lot of these other teams. So for me, Kaiser is in, and at Ave Maria at 8-8, that is clear cut to me that they are out completely. So again, that's opening up a top 15 spot right there to be filled.
Yeah, no question. I mean, it's really confusing to look at, and I mean, obviously, we're this poll is going to be released tomorrow, March 13th, but even from this poll tomorrow to the final regular season poll before we get into the postseason, I mean, there's going to be a lot of changes too. Like we had saw, of course, the preseason poll to now. I mean, it's going to be really wild to see, and we're going to be able to look back once postseason comes around on this first one and even the preseason one, and just really kind of shake your head at what's kind of gone on to start 2024 here.
Yeah. And Taylor, I hate to do this because I would love to sit here and talk about this all day because I think we very well could. There are so many interesting, scenarios we could play out in our head, but we could probably dedicate an entire episode to just talking
Yeah.
about the conference ratings and what that might indicate for the coaches poll tomorrow. But we do have some very good games coming up this weekend that we would love to let y'all know about. So let's go ahead and move on to weekend games and series to watch. First one is going to be going down in Elizabethton, Tennessee, as a 15-6 Pikeville team who is 6-4 in their last 10 takes on Milligan, 16-7 overall, 6-4 in their last 10.
Yeah, that one's going to be super interesting to see. The next one we've got would going into the KCAC with Avila, who's 13-11, 7-3 in their last 10, going down to Bartlesville and taking on Oklahoma Wesleyan squad, who's 16-8 and 8-2 in their last 10.
Heading on down to Blue Mountain, Mississippi, as a team we've mentioned quite a bit throughout this episode. Point University is going to be taking on Blue Mountain Christian in this one. Point University 16-7, 6-4 in their last 10. Blue Mountain Christian is 16-5, 8-2 in their last 10. Identical records. I do think this is going to be quite the scrap down there in Blue Mountain, Mississippi.
And in the Sooner Athletic Conference, USAO is going to go down to Fort Worth and take on number 21 Texas Wesleyan. USAO sits at 14-8, 6-4 in their last 10. Texas Wesleyan 14-10 and 5-5 in their last 10. Should be a fun one in the Sooner.
Heading over to Montgomery, West Virginia, as IU Kokomo, 15-11 on the year, 7-3 in their last 10, is taking on West Virginia University Tech, who is 14-8, 7-3 in their last 10. I'm excited for this one. West Virginia Tech has had some tremendous pitching performances as of late, and IU Kokomo is getting hot right now.
And headed over to McKenzie, Tennessee, in the Mid South, we have the number 8 Cumberland's Patriots sitting at 20-4 on the year, 9-1 in their last 10 ball games. Going to a Bethel, Tennessee squad who sits at 19-3 and 9-1 in their last 10. That one should be super interesting in Tennessee.
Yes, Taylor, on paper, that is one of the best matchups this week, looking at their records, but it is not the best matchup of the week. The best matchup of the week, of course, is going to be our big series of the week presented by the Show Me Collegiate League. We'd like to remind you that the big series of the week is now sponsored by the Show Me Collegiate League, which is based out of Southwest Missouri. We are extremely proud to have them join us for the season, and we encourage you to check them out on X at Show Me League. That's at SHO Me League on X today. Taylor, the best, hands down, the best matchup this week has to be going down in Babson Park, Florida, as the Big Shoes of the Week is going down in Florida. As number one ranked Southeastern 19-2 on the year takes on number 12 Weber International 21-3.
Yeah, and this one, quite frankly, this one could be the best regular season matchup we have all season long. Two teams that look like World Series title contenders. I mean, Weber coming in with the nation high 13 game win streak, Southeastern, of course, we know about them and the just stable of arms that they have this year. Like you said, Southeastern leads the all time matchup 40-27.
It's a lot
This
closer than
one
I
in
thought it would be.
this one in the Sun Conference too, like we mentioned with Southeastern winning the national title a few years back, Weber being in the World Series there that same season, and Coach Colin Martin and Coach Adrian Dinkel, two of the best in the NAIA right here. Like I said, this one is one we looked forward to as the season started, and it's going to be one of the best ones we see all season long.
Yeah, I'm for one very excited. And I believe this series is stretched out across Thursday to Sunday. So I believe they're playing one game a day. At least that's what it appeared to look like. But yeah, this is a potential World Series matchup here in the Sun Conference Showdown. And if we have to dive into, if we're talking Southeastern, we have to talk Southeastern pitching, and you have to lead off with none other than starting pitcher Darian Smith. 5-0 on the year, 35 innings pitched, a .77 ERA, 56 strikeouts on the year, and only 5 walks. That's insane. And opponents are only hitting 130 off of him, Taylor.
Yeah, Darian Smith, after coming over from Florida Gulf Coast 2 years ago now, and I believe it's 4 times this year he's been the Sun Conference Pitcher of the Week, and what a special arm. I mean, we can talk about him for a long, long time. A .77 ERA and a schedule like Southeastern plays and continues to play this year. I mean, that's just incredible numbers. A nation strikeout leader right here. This one is going to be one you want to tune into every time Smith takes the ball. And looking at another arm too, Rob Adams, who's been there for quite some time now, this being his
Needs
third
no
season.
introduction.
Absolutely not. 2022 National Pitcher of the Year. Just an all-time season that was. And this season coming in with a 3-0 record, 23 innings pitched, 23 strikeouts, only walked 4 guys. I mean, what an animal on the mound he is. And Darian Smith's this ace right now. And when you look at the bullpen too, Tyler, I mean, you have a whole stable. You truly have it's a team ERA right now of 2.77. I mean,
That's
that's
absurd.
unheard of. It's the best pitching staff in the country going up against definitely another top 5 pitching staff in the country in Weber International. Kobe Reeves, Colby Martin, Ramsey David, Reese Weisinger out of the pen. Martin was up to 101 this past weekend. Reeves was up to 97. Ramsey was up to 97. And of course, Reese Weisinger, the national reliever of the year last year. This staff it's going to be must see every time they play a game, and it needs no introduction here this weekend against what's definitely going to be a top 5 matchup.
I was just going to mention when you started mentioning velocities, if you have not checked out Southeastern's X page, they have been recently posting top velocities over the weekend. And like you mentioned, Colby Martin getting up to 101, and all the latter half of the names you just mentioned, all above 95. So if you have not checked out Southeastern's Baseball X page, they have been recently posting their top velos from the weekend. And Kobe Reeves, Colby Martin, Ramsey David, Reese Wissinger, all names that are frequently going to appear on that list.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And when you think Southeastern, you can't talk about them without mentioning the offense. And it's a little weird to see because this offense isn't. I mean, it's an incredible offense. It's an elite offense. Don't get me wrong. I mean, leadoff man Josh Pagozzo has 7 bombs, currently leading the team. If you would have told me that at the start of the season, I mean, that would have really surprised me. But I mean, 1 through 9, they continue to just rake and rake and rake. And such a tough Sun conference here. Weber being that second one, 2 of them always battling it out for the conference title. But what a pitching staff, man! And on the other side, too, with Weber International, you get into another Sun Conference Pitcher of the Week, Blaine Huter, who's won the award 2 times this year. He's 4-0 on the year, 32 innings pitched, a 2.25 ERA, 39 punch outs to only 8 walks. Opponents are hitting 200 off of him. If you look at that matchup there on Thursday night under the lights, Blaine Huter and Darian Smith, if we get that, all baseball fans far and wide need to tune into that one, because that one is going to be one of the best pitching matchups you're going to see at any level all season long.
Yeah, that is a matchup I hope we get. That's the recipe for a great low scoring game. You would think, at least, you would think this isn't going down in Southeastern's home turf, which we know is historically a bang box down there, especially for that offense. But if you look at, got to talk about Weber International's offense, man. You look at guys like Ryan Riccio and Ty Milliner. Ryan Riccio hitting 417 on the year with 4 bombs, 20 RBIs. On the other hand, you got Ty Milliner, 311 on the year, 6 bombs, 22 RBIs. Very tough lineup, in my opinion. Yes, Southeastern is very pitching heavy this year. They have a lot of guys that can get the job done, but looking at this Weber International lineup, it's might not be as easy as Southeastern usually makes it look.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, the Warriors or Weber International come in with the team average above 300. Obviously, led, like you said, by Milner and Resio. Milner has had some big time moments in a lot of these games, and Weber really has one of the best resumes in the country if you look at it.
They do.
I mean, I believe it. I believe it's 9 wins in the top 30. They just recorded their seventh top 20 win in a row. Looking at the preseason poll too. The Warriors have had one of the nation's toughest schedules, and they're sitting at 21-3 right now, winning 13 games in a row. I mean, this one is shaping up to be the Sun Conference title right here, as we're going to sit in the middle of March. When you look at the bullpen too, obviously it's not just Huter, Braden Matthews, and in the number 2 spot. He's 4-0 on the year with 32 strikeouts and 33 innings pitched, a 3.24 ERA. And then out of the bullpen too, Seth Lavelle has looked incredible in 7 appearances, 14 innings pitched. He's only walked 2 batters in 14 innings, punching out 16 guys and a 2.57 ERA out of the pen. If you want pitching matchups, you're going to have quite a bit of them between both the starters at Southeastern and Weber, and of course these incredible bullpens and incredible all offenses all around. I mean, a top 5 matchup, no doubt. Like I said, this one, I'm super, super pumped to see this one.
Yeah, I can't wait to tune into this one. I'm thoroughly excited for this. Probably the best matchup, regular season matchup we have all year, quite literally. So this one, definitely one you're going to want to tune into as big series of the week, is heading down to Babson Park, Florida for Southeastern and Weber International. Please tune in. It is going to be a great, great series. And ladies and gentlemen, that is going to bring us to our NAIA Ball quick picks. And once again, he's only joining us because he won last week. Again, we are very blessed to be joined by the VP of NAIA Ball, Connor Darnell. Connor, thanks again for joining us here for quick picks.
Hey, thanks for having me. If it keeps working out like this, it sounds like I'm going to be seeing you guys every week.
Yep. As soon as Connor falls out of that one spot, which will be very soon, I'm hoping he will no longer be joining us out of embarrassment. But a little bit of we're going to go over the standings here after week 2. So we did make a change on scoring. We do think that the big series of the week should be valued higher. Getting the big series of the week picked correctly should be valued higher than every other game. So we are now moving to a point system with the games and series to watch, which would be 1 through 6. Game 1 through 6 being the games. So we have 6 games and series that we tell you to watch every week. Those are all going to be worth 1 point. And the big series of the week is going to be worth 2 points. So if you hit that big series of the week, boys, you're getting 2 points added onto that score. So the standings after week 2 are as follows. Coming in at 1, unfortunately, it is still Connor with 11 points. He is 9-5 overall on the year. Coming in at number 2, we have Taylor with 9 points, who's 8-6 on the year. I am at 3rd with 8 points. I am 6-8 on the year. And Robbie is coming in 4th with 6 points on the year. He is also 6-8 overall. So once again, just to remind all of you listening, the eligible games for quick picks are the games and series to watch. There are 6 of them, followed by the big series of the week. I do have Robbie's picks here, boys, so we will run through his first, and per request of the week champion, we will be switching up the order. Connor will be going 3rd, Taylor 2nd, and I will be going 4th. So, kicking things off here, we have Pikeville at Milligan. Robbie is going to be taking Milligan in this matchup. Taylor, who are you taking here?
This one's tough. We've had Pikeville in a big series of the week earlier on this season. They've looked pretty impressive too. start the year. Pretty evenly matched series, but I kind of like the Buffs here. I like Milligan. Go ahead and give me the Milligan Buffaloes to get this series done over Pikeville.
Sco Buffs, as some might say. I would be one of those people hailing from Colorado. Sco Buffs. Connor, who you taking?
You know, coming off that tough week last week, I think Milligan's got something to prove, and I think they're going to come out swinging. Give me Milligan.
It is going to be Sco Buffs. Clean sweep for Milligan. I will also be taking Milligan in this matchup, which moves us to our featured KCAC matchup of the week. Avila going up against Oakwoo. Robbie is taking Oklahoma Wesleyan. Taylor, who are you going here?
Looking at this matchup too, we mentioned earlier, Avila has looked good to start the year, but this one being in Bartlesville, some may call it Barrelsville, Oklahoma. If you know, you know. Give me Oklahoma Wesleyan. Give me the Eagles and Kirk Kelly's squad. I think Oklahoma Wesleyan gets this done.
Taylor going Oakwoo. Connor, who you taking?
You know, I think it's going to be another clean sweep here, depending on you. Give me the Eagles. I think they've got a good bunch, and I think they've got some good pieces and a key arm kind of working his back or way back into the rotation. And I think they're going to take care of business this weekend. Give me Oklahoma Wesleyan.
Another clean sweep here, as I will also be taking Oklahoma Wesleyan. The only thing I would like to know is if this game is going to be played at their practice field or the stadium in Bartlesville. I think that could make a difference. I mean, I do see Oklahoma Wesleyan still winning the series, but playing at that stadium versus their practice field could make a little bit of a difference, as the ball doesn't necessarily fly as much at that stadium as it does at their practice field. But nonetheless, I do see Oklahoma Wesleyan taking the series, which moves us to Point University taking on Blue Mountain Christian. Robbie is picking Blue Mountain Christian. Connor, check that. Taylor, who are you going?
Yeah, I picked against Point last week, and they kind of bit me there, taking down Middle Georgia. But Blue Mountain Christian too has looked really good. Pico Townsend has started the year red hot in that offense, coming off a Team of the Week performance too. But I like Point, man. I think Point's going to go into Blue Mountain Christian and get a big time series victory.
Connor, Point, and Blue Mountain Christian.
You know, like Taylor was saying, it's kind of tough. Obviously, Blue Mountain coming off a really good weekend. I picked Point last week, so I think I'm gonna have to ride with Point. They went out and had a good showing, and I'm not going to doubt them. I think they're going to go out there and take care of business. Give me Point.
2 votes for Point. I'm going to be taking Blue Mountain Christian here, as you know, obviously they are coming off a 3-game sweep against number 18 Mobile. Now, granted, number 18 Mobile has not been playing up to the caliber that we are used to seeing them, but nonetheless, sweeping a ranked team is a good win in my book. So give me Blue Mountain Christian in this matchup. I like Blue Mountain Christian. I know I picked against Point last week, and I will be picking against them again, which does take us down for a Sooner matchup here, as we have receiving votes USAO going up against number 21 ranked Texas Wesleyan in Fort Worth. Taylor, who is your pick?
You know, USAO's already dropped series to Mid America Christian here, and Texas Wesleyan's obviously coming off a series loss to Southwestern Christian up in Oklahoma this past weekend too. Both teams really need this one early on in the Sooner. I like the Drovers though. It's a tough ballpark to play in Fort Worth, but I think the Drovers kind of right the ship here against a really good Texas Wesleyan squad. I like the Drovers to take this series.
Okay. Connor, are you going to risk losing your job and voting against USAO here?
You know, I had some people ask me about this today, if I'm making the trip down there. Unfortunately, I'm not. I wish I could. It's always good to see Coach Garza in the bunch, but you know, I went to practice yesterday. I went to practice today. If you guys don't know, I'm the assistant SID at USAO. So give me the Drovers. I can't go against the Drovers. You know, if I didn't work here, I'd probably still pick the Drovers, but I think they're going to go down there. They've been swinging it hot, pitching it up to par, and I think we're going to go down there and take the series versus Tex West.
You know, I'm also going to have to take USAO here, as a big shout out to Gage Ninnis, Robbie Schmidt, and the squad, as I do see the Drovers taking down number 21 Texas Wesleyan, which does move us to an interesting matchup here, as we have IU Kokomo and West Virginia Tech. Robbie is picking West Virginia Tech in this matchup. Taylor, how do you see this going down?
I'm going to go with the Golden Bears too. I think West Virginia Tech gets this done. IU Kokomo is a good squad, obviously, that we have seen in recent years too. But West Virginia Tech's pitching has really impressed to start the year. I feel like they make our shout outs and mentions almost every week, and seem to have a good pitching performance every time I check the box score. So give me West Virginia Tech to defend their home turf up there in Montgomery, West Virginia. I like the Golden Bears.
Connor, how do you see it?
This one's kind of tough for me. I'm not really, I'd say, too familiar with these two teams, but looking through the schedules, IU Kokomo's kind of, I don't know if I'd say had the tougher schedule. Obviously, West Virginia Tech started off with a good series with Montreat. I believe they split that series, and IU Kokomo's played Tennessee Wesleyan. They played Point Park. I might be a little different here, but give me IU Kokomo. I might get up one more on you guys. You guys might catch up one more on me. I don't know. I'm willing to take that risk. Give me IU Kokomo.
I initially looking at this one, I was thinking about taking West Virginia Tech because their pitching has been very strong with guys like Robert Kelly, who we had mentioned earlier. I do see him winning his start, but being a resident of Indiana, I got to ride with the IU boys. So go ahead and give me IU Kokomo to win this one here. Does take us to a very marquee matchup here, boys, as we have number 8 Cumberland's going up against Bethel, Tennessee. Robbie is taking the 8th ranked Patriots of Cumberland's. Taylor, who is your pick here?
I'm also going to take the Patriots at Cumberland's. I think the Patriots have a little bit of something to prove, like I've mentioned since the start of the year. This year, they offensively and on the mound too, they have looked really, really impressive and look to be a World Series contender yet again under Coach Brad Shelton. Bethel has a really nice record, but I think the Patriots go in there and get this done.
Connor, how do you see this one?
At first I was like, this is a pretty good matchup if you look at record wise, but I think I'm gonna have to take Brad Shelton and the boys over at Cumberland's. They've had a pretty good start to the year, 20-4. They've had some good top 25 wins as of right now, and I don't think that's going to stop. I think they're going to go in there and take care of Bethel this weekend.
I have to absolutely agree with that. I will also be taking Cumberland's. I do think, although the records are very even on paper, Cumberland's is just the better caliber team here in this matchup, but obviously not playing at home, but still, I do think Cumberland's takes this one at least 2 games, or they might be a 4-game set. I'm not sure, but nonetheless, give me Cumberland's, which, boys, that does take us to the big series of the week as number 1 Southeastern goes up against number 12 Weber International in Babson Park, Florida, home of the Warriors. Robbie is taking Southeastern here. Is anybody going to be going against Southeastern here? We'll start off with Taylor.
Looking at this series, like we mentioned, it's one of the most hyped up ones. It's one of the ones that we've looked forward to the most to start the season here. The fire, though, that pitching staff, despite facing this really good Weber offense and an incredible pitching staff too under Coach Colin Martin, I like the fire. I think the staff is elite. I think it could be one of the best staffs that we have seen in quite some time here in the NAIA. So give me the fire, despite going on the road to Babson Park, tough place to play, a beautiful setting there too, right on the lake. Give me Southeastern.
Connor, Southeastern, and Weber.
Like Taylor said, this one's been circled on the schedule for quite a bit. One of the most anticipated matchups and series of the year, especially after we see how this poll is going to come out on Wednesday. It could be a top 5 matchup. Who knows? But I think Weber is capable of beating them, but I think Southeastern is going to take the series. I think they're going to take this series, take care of business, but I do think Weber could get a game off of them. I don't know what game that would be, but I think they'd get one, but I think Southeastern's gonna take it.
It's going to be a clean sweep here for Southeastern, the number 1 ranked team, as I will also be taking the fire. But it is to be noted that I do think that if Southeastern were to drop a series this year, it would be to Weber. I think Weber is the only team sound enough to compete with them for all 3 games. We see Southeastern playing some, like most recently when they had that close game with Mount Marty, A lot of teams aren't going to be able to have the depth to hang with them over a 3-game set, but I do think Weber will be the only team that they face this year in a series that does have the same depth, or at least close to the same as depth, to be able to hang with them all 3 games. But I'm still going to be taking the Fire, but it should be noted that if Southeastern were to drop a series this year, it would be to Weber. But clean sweep for Southeastern, and there you have it. There is quick picks for week 3, and we will be sure to update the points after this weekend, and we will be happy to report that hopefully Mr. Connor Darnell has dropped out of first place, and maybe you won't be hearing him next week, and you'll know why. But I think that's going to do it for season 7, episode 7 of the NAIA Ball podcast. We would like to thank all of you for tuning in, and we would like to thank Mr. Connor Darnell again for joining us for quick picks. If you are not following us on X and Instagram, be sure to do that. You can follow at NAIA Ball for all your NAIA Ball scores, news, and updates. You can follow myself on X at TNOR46. You can hit Taylor on X at _ Taylor Thomas 14. And if you are not already following Mr. Connor Darnell on X, you need to go do that. Look at the graphics, look at the work he's doing. You can find him at GotDunks21. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Have a great day and a better tomorrow.